Hi, welcome to the Always Evolving podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick. Understanding and embracing your core values is essential for improving your quality of life. This self-awareness helps to ensure that your daily habits, behaviors, and relationships are actually getting you closer to what matters most to you. Joining us today is Deana Bledsoe, licensed associate counselor. Deana is here to discuss the importance of core values in relationships, including how to ensure that you're actually in alignment. It's okay that we don't have it all figured out. We're all just taking it a day at a time. This is Always Evolving with Dr. Liz. Deana, welcome to Always Evolving.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. It is so great to connect again. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, what you specialize in.
Yes, so I am a counselor. I'm a therapist here in Arizona. I specialize working with trauma. I am EMDR trained, so I love working with individuals who are trying to figure all of that out and trying to really make peace with their past. And I work with individuals who are struggling with certain things in their relationships. And so that's what I do. It's what I love to do every day.
Yes. And that is what we're going to talk about today in terms of one of the most foundational aspects of a healthy, thriving relationship are the core values that we bring into it and alignment in those core values, which is not always taken into consideration when we're thinking about chemistry and compatibility and all of these things that, we have to think of when getting into a relationship. But where do the core values come in? Like, I guess first, how do you define core values? And then how do they come into the relationship?
Yeah. So core values are essentially a set of principles, ideas, and beliefs that we bring into a relationship. So it's like the essence of who we are, right? It's the way that we live our lives based off of what is most important to us and what we want to show up as. So, for example, some of our core values can be integrity or achievement based. Like those are things that we really hold in high regard. Mm-hmm. And when we're in a relationship, those can be things that show up in different ways in how we like our actions, our thoughts, and really just the way that we engage and interact with ourselves and with our partner.
And pretty commonly, we see them come up also in terms of what people prioritize, which is where I see a lot of conflict come in for my clients, when I'm working with couples, or even if I'm working with individuals and they're talking about this type of conflict in a relationship. But if somebody values, let's say, family or quality time together, things like that, whereas somebody else might value more their career or success or achievement, neither one of them being right or wrong, which, by the way, societal expectations and influence tends to tell us that some are right or wrong. But then what we see happen is that they prioritize different things, which leads to these feelings of like, you don't care about me because you're not prioritizing the same thing. How do you work through that?
So the way that I view core values or an individual's value system is in a relationship, they don't have to be the same. Right. So they don't have to be our top 5 values don't have to align with our partner in terms of like, we have the same, but they have to have awareness around what is important to us and respect and honor what they are. That way the couple can feel like they are in alignment, right? Yeah. So if a couple does, or if an individual in a relationship does really value their career and success and achievement, and their partner really values family, right? Like those can exist in a relationship and it still be successful, but there has to be a way that we can coexist and make sure that both individuals' needs are being met.
Yes. Yeah. And the collaboration piece of that is so crucial and can be so hard because we get stuck in our mindset and feel as though our values are the right values. And so we have a hard time collaborating on that. But often, I think to your point, having different values can actually be a beneficial thing for a relationship because if handled correctly, it can bring balance to the relationship.
I think of it like a yin to my yang, right? Like, so an easy one to think of would be if like one person in the relationship is a bit more type A personality, maybe they value structure and like knowing what's coming next, like routine is really valuable to them. And their partner can be a bit more open. They like novelty, they like adventure, right? Like they're less rigid in the way they live life. That can be a beautiful balance because they can give each other a little bit of what the other person needs or doesn't have.
Yes. So it's all the perspective around them and it's how they're treated. How do you help individuals or couples identify their core values?
So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it, but I think it starts with just like getting clear on what they are. Sure. So if an individual or a couple wanted to just like explore what that would be, a cool example or a cool exercise would be to just like sit down, have like 20 core values in front of them, and then they can categorize it to what's very important, what's not important, and what's kind of important to them. And then we're going to eliminate half of those and get really clear on like what's the top 5 things that I know that I need in a relationship so that I can feel like myself, I can feel fulfilled. That way I can really give my relationship my full attention and feel satisfied with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that is a great approach. I often suggest for my clients, you can find hundreds of these. If you are Google Images, you can find tons of the core values sheets. So find one that kind of resonates, that looks like, okay, this is a good list. Usually they have, 50 to 100 or whatever. And I have them narrow it down. So like you're saying, I have them go through, and any that resonate to them, I'm like, just, highlight any of them that resonate, and then narrow that down to 10. And then, like you're saying, bring it down to the 5, because often when I have people do this exercise, they might come back with like 10 or 15. And that's a lot of like conflicting information. That's, almost overwhelmed to try to live according to all of those things cannot be your number one priority.
Yeah. Right. We got to narrow it down. That way it also feels more digestible, right? Like as an individual and for your partner. Because if I know as a person in a relationship, I know that my partner really values family, they value communication, and they value legacy. That gives me a clear picture of like the direction that they want this relationship to go in. Right. So it also gives a set of like clear expectations on what they want and how could I really meet those, or does that even align with what I want as an individual long term in this relationship?
Yes. And then how do you help somebody to collaborate on that? If you're working with a couple, or if you're working with that individual and they're bringing in, these topics to you, how do you suggest that they then go back to their partner and even start this conversation and then work to find that alignment?
Communication is going to be the key, right? Like nobody can really guess what the other person is thinking or what the other person wants. So creating a space where we know that, hey, I want to just have a conversation with you about what's important to you and what's not. What's important to you, like as a human individually, and what's important to you in our relationship, right? Like let's just like make sure we're on the same page, in the same paragraph, on the same word. That way we have really clear understanding of what we're doing here together.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, to define them separately these are my individual core values, but then these are my relationship core values, because I do think that that looks different, where maybe achievement for somebody, if an individual value, but as a couple, it's maybe going to be more like communication or quality time together versus quantity, and having that distinction and knowing what that looks like for both of you. But then I think it's important to then get specific. So if you have that word, whatever the value is, what does that actually mean? How do you define that? What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's also interesting is what our value system is when we start a relationship can be completely different when when we've been in a relationship for a few years. Right. So like also giving ourselves grace to know that we are ever evolving, we're ever changing. Our priorities can also evolve in the same sense, and giving ourselves and our partner space to grow, no matter what that is. Because I believe that couples can get through anything, any sort of conflict, as long as there's like communication there. Communication and like the ability to grow and the openness to.
Right. Which is absolutely key, because When people are together a long time, they believe, oh, this means that I know everything about you. Whereas you're saying people are growing and they're changing. And so you often don't know as much as you think you do unless you're having these really intentional conversations. And so even on that note with these core values, whether you're just, getting into a new relationship or you've been in one for a while, but you've never talked about this, set it up as something that you do even like annually, or you set every 6 months, something like that, where you're checking in on, does this still feel true to you? And are our behaviors and our lifestyles reflecting what we each value?
Yeah. And just asking the questions like, how are you feeling about our relationship right now? Is there anything in our relationship that you would like to spend more time on? Is there anything that we haven't been intentional enough about? And also making sure that we're coming to our partner from a space of like non-judgment and just curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? Like giving our partner the space to allow them to change and grow and to not feel like a lot of pressure. Right? That's
really
the way
hard.
I like to approach it. Yeah,
yes,
it can be.
Sure. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Deana, for being here. Tell everyone where they can find you, socials, website.
So you guys can find me on Instagram. It's Deana Bledsoe _therapy. I'm also with Aligned Counseling and Consulting. So you can find me there as well on the website.
Well, very good. Thank you again for being here. It was so good talking with you.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you again, Deana, for helping us to better understand the importance of our core values. And thank you all for joining us on the Always Evolving podcast. We would love it if you could rate and subscribe, and also check out our website, www.evolvecounselingaz.com, to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter with even more helpful mental health tips. You can also find us on Instagram at evolvecounselingaz. This is Always Evolving with Dr. Liz.